I'm the founder of Creative Community and also a partner here at Stubbs Alderton and Markleese, and the co-chair of the Copyright and Trademark Practice Group. And we're here today.
That's my guy.
Here to talk about the digital space here. And this firm opened this office about 2 years ago. And thanks to another partner of mine who's sitting in the back, Kevin DeBray, who's an IP technology partner, and Scott Alderton, who could not be here tonight. We opened this office to work particularly with entrepreneurs and to become much more involved in the Silicon Beach sort of confluence of digital media and entertainment. And this space that you're in is what we call our pre-accelerator space, where we have 5 or 6 companies at any one time that we are mentoring, supporting with legal counsel, introducing to financial resources, and on a regular basis, on a monthly basis, we bring in speakers on finance, marketing, sales, to help support these entrepreneurs as they build these companies. But one of the most important areas is the creative area. And I've been spending several decades protecting the rights of creators in film, television, fashion, music. And the creative community idea came out because I felt like with the growth of the digital space, that the value of creative work and the creators themselves were being somewhat diminished, and there was a lack of recognition for the work that goes into creating, whether it's music or film or fashion. And the purpose of Creative Community is not to legislate, it's not to lobby, it's really to start a discussion in the bigger community about the importance of creativity and the creators, protecting them, and also the economics by which creators have to deal with and to support creative endeavors in general. So tonight we have a great cross-section of the creative community here in LA. And I am very pleased and appreciative that they agreed to give their time tonight. So I'm going to introduce each one if you haven't met them, and then we're going to talk about a few subjects and also open it up to you to interact and ask questions and just have a free flow discussion and see where it takes us. So to my left is Mark Guggenheim, and Mark, I recently went to it wasn't that recent, but it wasn't that long ago, a book signing that he had for a terrific book, which I am plugging here tonight.
Thank you.
Called Overwatch. It's a great read, and it's short. You know? So it's not going to sit at your nightstand for 6 months. But Mark is very accomplished, and he's a rehabilitated litigator.
Yes. Recovering, I like to say.
Recovering.
In recovery.
Yeah, he's in recovery. And Mark has spent the last couple of years as the creator and producer of a show called Arrow, which is on the CW. And it's really an outgrowth of your interest in all the great old Marvel comics and sci-fi, and it's a terrific show. And so it's a lot, I mean, you have much to be proud of.
Thank you.
And Mark has worked for many shows, Brothers and Sisters, The Practice, many. And so we're really pleased that he could take the time to come over from Burbank and be here tonight. Next to Mark is the effervescent Catherine Ireland, who is, to say the least, one of the world's foremost interior decorators.
Nice.
To say the least.
And Catherine is also a textile designer and manufacturer. And let's face it, she is a designer to the stars, but I think one of the great qualities about Catherine is that she's really very down to earth. She's self-deprecating.
I always call that, by the way, I hate to interrupt, defecating. I want to say I was self-defecating.
Defecating, okay.
Sorry, go on.
And, you know, there's a joie de vivre about you, Catherine, that I like. And we share a common love for the south of France and French things. And
Please.
right.
So over the French.
So, but it's interesting because I was reading, you know, going through her books, and let me not forget to plug her latest book, Catherine Ireland, Inspired By, and it's a great read, and it goes through various other designers than herself who have influenced her or who are important to her, and it's fascinating, actually. The best quote I saw is, "I love a ruin."
Oh, you know I love a ruin.
She loves a ruin, and then she likes to transform these
I like to
ruins.
bring it back to life,
Right.
but not in men. I mean, it has to be a building.
Okay. And you might know Catherine spent 2 seasons on the Bravo show called $1 Million Decorators. And now she's just filmed a pilot for a new TV series that we hope we'll see shortly. Next to her is one of, I I call him now the music impresario because
That's a good title.
Take it.
yeah, I just thought of that the other day, and I emailed to Jeff Jampol because he is engaged in so many incredible projects, and he's taken on the responsibility of mentoring, cultivating the history and sort of the care of some of the greatest icons in modern music.
We call it management.
Management, that's it.
Technical term, but.
Management. So Jeff is responsible for, the public view of The Doors and Jim Morrison, for Tupac Shakur, for Otis Redding, for Janis Joplin, for the Ramones, for Henry Mancini, Rick James, Peter Tosh, and I probably left some out. But that is an incredible responsibility to try to position these people correctly in history and to also introduce them to new generations of listeners. And so Jeff was the producer of a Grammy Award-winning film on the Doors, When You're Strange. You might have seen that. And I had the great honor of going to see a Broadway production which he produced called A Night with Janis Joplin, which is coming to Pasadena, I guess, in July. It is an incredible show. I got to tell you, they blow the rafters off the roof. There was a 10-minute standing ovation, and people said, "We're coming back again." And it's that type of show. And that took a lot of... So Jeff's involved in films on Janis Joplin, I guess with Amy Adams, There's a documentary coming out on Janis Joplin. There are films on Otis Redding. You have a musical, a Henry Mancini musical in development. I asked Jeff, how are you doing all this? And he obviously has good people working with him, Aaron and Kenny and others. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.
David Hillary is a producer of many films, mainly from the independent genre. And David has worked as a co-producer for many of the films for Muse Productions, and also Deviant Films, where you were involved in. And I don't know all the names and titles of the films, but I know you have films in productions with Paul Schrader directing. You have films with a lot of top-notch directors and talent involved and attached to them. And I know you're, and I know you're working on a web project now as well. So entertainment for the web. Next to David is Brandon Scott. And Brandon and his sister Sarah, who together are part of Scott X Scott, or yeah. And Brandon has an interesting story. He got into the fashion business after graduating from San Francisco State. He was named Sportswear International's Designer of the Year in 2007. He was one of the finalists on NBC's Fashion Star, and he will tell you about some very interesting projects that he's involved in, very entrepreneurial, that involve fashion but are a little unusual and off the beaten track. Sarah started her career in design. She worked in interior design for many years. You've seen probably her work at some of the big hotels in town as well as restaurants. And now you have your own clothing line as well. And she's in charge of the company's women's division as well as marketing and other responsibilities. So it's, one of the things that they all have together is these are all the creators. And what I wanted to talk about tonight was sort of how they got to where they are now, and then how is the digital environment affecting what they're doing, influencing what they're doing, changing maybe what they set out to do, and if there are issues, such as, protection or compensation, and I know some of the members of the audience have some pretty strong views about, whether what's going on in the digital space now is actually compensating creators adequately. So I'll start with Mark and why don't you tell us about your sort of career path to this point and how you got here?
Well, the short version is I used to be a lawyer. Apart from my own, my other own lawyer's firm, this is the first law firm I've actually been in 15 years. It's weird. My first job was the practice, and I broke into television, and then sort of started to expand into comic books and video games and movies and prose fiction, and now I'm working on Arrow, and that's that. Wow, I was like, I've got to condense this into the last 15 years into something really short. I think I overcompensated, but that's basically that's the short version.
Okay.
Super short version.
Very good.
Yeah.
Tapper.
Go shorter. Top that.
I started in film production. I moved to LA when I was 23. And one of my girlfriends said to me, I hope you don't want a boyfriend. I said, God no, I just left an Italian in Rome. I said, don't want a boyfriend. I was married 6 weeks later. Yeah, married. I married my husband, who was a director, and we produced in 3 years about 60 music videos. I don't know.
What's wrong with Italian men?
What?
What's wrong with
I
Italian men?
love them, believe me. I've gone full circle, don't worry.
Okay. I'm curious. I don't have any skin in the
No,
game.
no.
I'm just curious.
Anyway, so I remember I hardly knew his last name, but we got the guy in the front house where we lived and came and said, oh my God, I've got an invitation for this guy, Gary White. Do you know, is that, I said, well, I'll take it. I go up and go, God, I think Gary, I didn't realize there's a really famous other guy called Gary White, and he's been nominated for a Grammy for his Frank Sinatra documentary. He goes, don't be ridiculous, that's me. So I didn't even realize I married a man in the film business. So anyway, the long and the short is, this is taking a bit longer than you.
See, I'm glad I created the time.
Yeah, I know. Thank you
You're
so
welcome,
much.
you're
I'll
welcome.
take your minutes. Anyway, so I met this man, I married him, and we won every award for our music videos, which are basically that Call Me Al.
Oh.
Do you remember it?
I do.
Paul Simon, Chevy Chase. Paul called Gary and said, Gary, listen, we spent $250,000 at Warner Brothers, and you know, I don't like any of them. What can we do? He said, get a stage. I went to Pottery Barn and bought 2 chairs. Trevi came into town, we shot that. And then we went on to do 50 other music videos. I always say to people, I did not make my money in throw pillows and lampshades. Anyway, so in a nutshell, that's me. And then after having 3 children in 4 years, I just decided I would somehow segued into doing home furnishing, and that's, I won't go on about me, it's too boring.
Chef.
I think they say it's better to be lucky than smart, right? I worked my ass off. I really hit a bottom, had a long run with drug addiction, ended up on the street, sleeping on floors, and really had to kind of reinvent my life with a lot of help, a lot of outside help and a lot of friends, and just worked my way up. The thing that's really worked for me, I've been a manager for a long time, but it was about getting to know people, being a cool guy, not bullshitting people, telling people when I didn't know what I was doing. I find they're very willing to help that way. But it's like, there's this ultimate, what William Goldman calls the ultimate truism of Hollywood, right? Which is nobody knows anything. And I find that to be fairly true, myself included. And so I think there's a lot of fear and insecurity and schadenfreude that goes on because people are afraid they're not going to be associated with a hit, or they're not going to have a hit, or if there is a hit, they're not going to be able to glom onto it, and their boss or partner is going to look askance at them. And I think if you just kind of are up front and tell people what's going on, they want to help. Everybody loves to hear themselves talk, me included, right? Anyway, I just worked my ass off, got really good in one particular field through being really bad in another. The bottom line is, really, when I started as a manager, all of my peers and friends who started at the same time were becoming millionaires and multimillionaires, and I was stuck at home in a rented apartment because I never had a hit touring artist. Bad ears, bad judgment, bad luck, whatever it is. I had a couple good records, but none of my artists could sell tickets. Nobody cared. And in the music business, you make money through tickets and t-shirts. And so literally for 20-something years, one thing I did realize is a lot of my peers knew nothing about publishing, like zero. So I decided I would become an expert on publishing. They knew next to nothing about international, so I became an expert on international. They knew nothing about licensing. I became an expert on licensing just because I had nothing else to do. I became an expert at film and TV, and I became a real expert at retail, which is completely different from tour merch. Right? The touring merch business is a souvenir business. The retail business is an apparel business. And then I'm a really good music trivia guy. I know my history. I know the politics and culture of different eras. And those are all just hobbies of mine, just stuff I cleave to. I never thought it would all come together. I mean, if I could have planned this, I would be a genius. It just happened. But I was there, I worked hard, I had a little knowledge, I had a lot of good friends and a lot of help and a lot of luck. That's about it.
Oh, we love Lauren. I don't remember.
Well, my life is not that dramatic, but no, I think it started in the 90s where I was just simply, I started out reading scripts for a studio and then ultimately evolved into working at various production companies. And, you know, they give great titles out, you know, creative executive, vice president of production, things like that. And I spent the last, I guess you could say as an executive or in-house producer with Muse Films, up to about 2004. But there, I did learn a lot about what I wanted to do. I didn't want to be in the studio system, I wanted to be in the independent system. The independent world was kind of like, there weren't really genre films because you can't afford to compete with Warner Brothers or Paramount. So I divided them up into two films. You know, it's indie quirky films like Napoleon Dynamite, or indie edge films like what we made at Muse Films, like American Psycho or Virgin Suicides or Buffalo 66. When I left, the independent film business was already breaking a little bit, but I had a deal with Sony where they would output our films and stuff, whether it's through Stage 6 or whatever division they decided, but they would fund them. And there was a time, I used to say this, there was a time where you could fund a film for $5 million with, you know, Billy Zane being the star. Now, they'll give you like $3 million and want Russell Crowe to be in your movie. And you have a contract, but their cast list is very challenging. So since 2004, been independent, and just continued to do that. And just to say that independent filmmaking it's a lifestyle choice. You have to enjoy it as a lifestyle. It's not just something you dabble in or you'll lose a lot of sleep, a lot of money, will just stress you out. I also think you have to have really just a sense of, you just have to be very comfortable with uncertainty. And it's okay. If you're not worried about all that. I think the big thing is, there were two things that happened, and I'll just say this in a few seconds. First, the DVD market kind of went away, which really hurt the independent film business. The second thing is, equity went to the sidelines after the mortgage failure and everything else. So that brought to the business where if there were 2 in 10 charlatans in the independent film world financing films, that brought like probably 5 in 10 charlatans in the independent film world, you know. And so you really had to be on your guard with who you were working with in these past few years. The other thing is that even when you do get a deal, and I would say some of my contracts with some studios are pretty good, but the lack of transparency, I think, in the accounting really scares a lot of great equity partners away from the business. So I think in terms of coming to the digital age, I think it's the independent film world the system's broken in some sense right now. I don't think the solution is going to come from studios. It's going to come from Silicon Beach, Silicon Valley. It's going to be coming from, I don't know, the Jeff Bezos of film and content. It's not going to happen from, you know, you can just see that when you have the most brilliant minds like Les Moonves or Bob Iger, they're doing great things, but no one really understands the holy grail of digital distribution and what that means from, you know, the prequel, sequels, remakes, and comic book graphic novels that studios do, and then what the rest of the world does, which is the independent films. And I think everyone has a dream when they come to the business, it's going to be like you're pitching to Tim Robbins in The Player and stuff, and they end up being in the world of Bowfinger. So that's a brilliant, that's a double feature. So I think somehow it has to be fixed. I don't know what it is. I think Warner Brothers dabbled with Batman, you know, the app to distribute, you know, all that. I think those types of things, there's got to be some way to get direct to your audience. I mean, I was on one film, I just wanted to go get an artist that has 64 million Twitter followers. So I said, well, let's make an offer to Katy Perry to play the role. She'll do a noir film with this actor. No. So you have to think about those things nowadays, but someone's going to come along, and I just would like to press a button so I could distribute my film digitally. It's not just a VOD has not replaced DVD completely. Otherwise, you see a lot more films being financed. We just need a way to get our films to our audience and use the social media platforms, you know, in an economical way to get it to our audience. Because I see most of my films when I see a Twitter feed like, hey, this film's opening at the Laemmle, and because I dive into those particular avenues. So my thing is, in terms of the digital age, it's the only thing that will save the independent film business.
Brett, okay.
So, we are Scott X Scott, and I don't think this one works. So, our story is, well, I started in San Francisco in my career at San Francisco State, and I have worked for a bunch of different brands doing creative directing or interning or anything you name, I did there. And I learned a tremendous amount. And the interesting thing was, though, what happened to a lot of people in 2008 was a lot of us lost our job and had nowhere to turn once the industry kind of spit everyone out. And that was kind of the big change for me was, okay, well, if no one's going to be offering anything, how am I going to make it happen, regardless of no funding? So 2008, our whole family sort of lost their job, and we decided to build a business together as a family without any money. And we started with what I had learned in the men's industry and launched my own brand in LA with, surprisingly, the funding from China, which was crazy. So we had, in San Francisco, I was making everything in San Francisco. Then in 2008, China was backing me to launch my own company. But after going through the gamut of going to trade shows 1 million times a year and going on the road and spending all that money, the whole industry changed for us too because of the digital era, and a lot of things went to direct to consumer. So you saw our brand, most brands hurting because most boutiques were having their own brand, and the direct to consumer was more apparent than ever than trying to do consignment or net 30 with all these boutiques that are never going to pay you anyway. So we were having the same issues as everyone else, and we decided that there needs to be someone out there in the world that helps designers get their ideas off the ground without it being a job at a multi-million-dollar company. So I would say in 2009, Sarah and I decided to launch a private label manufacturing company, which actually supports local designers making their own products in Los Angeles with no minimums. We found that when we were trying to launch our own company, China was saying 500,000 unit minimums. Who in their right mind can make that if you're brand new? You have no consumer that's going to give you that kind of order and front that kind of money. So we decided there is a huge gap in the market for the new era to get their ideas off the ground, made locally with zero minimums. And since we decided to do that, our entire business has changed, and it's become way more profitable for us to help the community rather than just designing for ourselves and trying to compete with the community. So that's kind of what we've kind of done with our life.
Well, Brandon said most of it, but basically I started out doing pre-med in school because I didn't think you could make any money off doing a creative job. I just thought, you know, maybe I'll just become a doctor because that seems like the more stable thing to do. And then when I graduated school, I got a job working for SBE and getting involved designing hotels and nightclubs and restaurants and working under Philippe Stark and getting to be surrounded by creative people, and it really motivated me and changed my opinion on how I could transition my career into doing something more creative. So from there, after working in the hospitality industry, when I lost my job as well in 2008, I started, you know, designing friends' homes, getting offers through friends to do little small projects, and my brother started the family business, and I really wanted to be a part of that. I've always been into fashion, and you know, I've always figured I could teach myself. Just surround myself by the right people, go home every day and study, like engulf myself in the creative process so I can learn more about it. And that's what I did. I launched my line, and Brandon helped me, and it was a success, and then it was a failure, and then it was a huge learning experience for me, and that's how we transitioned into the private label business. And I thought moving from doing your own line to doing manufacturing and production, it would be less creative, but it's actually been the most creative endeavor we've ever experienced because we get to work with, you know, countless designers every day and make their ideas come to life. Where, you know, when we started out, you walk into a factory and if they don't know who you are or what your brand is, no one's going to work with you. But since we kind of package all these designers into one group, we're able to hit the minimums by packaging them all together and giving people an opportunity to launch their brands. And we've had the opportunity to work with Kanye West, Adidas, Iggy Azalea, Usher, Kimpton Hotels, Urban Outfitters, Macy's, countless people that we've worked with in all levels from super high-end to mass market. So it's been a really creative endeavor for us, and it's been an experience working with our family, and it's been a lot of ups and downs, but so far we're on the up, so it's good.
Excellent. Excellent. Mark, how has the digital space transformed or affected what you've been doing at all?
Probably in two different ways. I write television shows and I write comic books, and those are probably the two fields that have been affected the most by digital distribution. Mm-hmm. Television, I've worked in network television for 15 years, and network television's had an interesting business model where they said, well, our whole business model is we sell commercial time to advertisers, and then we broadcast, on networks and cable stations our shows. And then, I don't know, maybe about 10 years ago, they decided, and we're going to start distributing that stuff to basically competing outlets, and all those competing outlets were digital. They did that without any business model or business plan whatsoever. So as a result, you ended up the networks ended up killing themselves because they were giving away their product not for free. They were making money off of it, but nothing in comparison to the way they truly made their money, which is selling advertising time to advertisers. So they television, I'm being very reductive here, but television basically stumbled into the digital space, probably to their detriment. But that's the world we're living in.
And how did that impact you as a producer, creator?
Well, fundamentally, it impacted me economically. Back in 2008, the Writers Guild of America decided they were going to do something interesting. Basically, as we've already heard in this panel, in 2008 there was the big mortgage crisis and the Great Recession, and all the writers, both in the Writers Guild of America West and the Writers Guild of America East, said, yeah, that's all very interesting, and that's nice. You guys are having your economic problems. We're going to try something. We're going to double down. We're actually going to take it even further. We're going to go on strike. And that's what we did in our infinite wisdom. And we did it actually over DVD residuals.
How long was the strike?
About 8 months, give or take. It felt longer, If time flies when you're having fun, the inverse is true. But what's really, really interesting is we basically went on strike over DVD residuals. And kind of, yeah, I know, right? Exactly. No one ever credited us for being smart. But just like a broken clock is right twice a day, we also what we ended up getting was jurisdiction over the internet, which in hindsight looks really, really smart. But it was a classic example of the broken clock being right twice a day. In fact, if you look at the 2004 contract, which is what predated the 2008 contract that we struck over, the 2004 contract ended up giving us a fairly favorable digital distribution rate. So it was a situation where the studios were like, what we really want to do is screw you on the DVDs and the VHS residuals. So yeah, that streaming's not going to be big at all. They gave us a pretty decent residual formula. So we ended up, getting the thing that we really, really wanted or needed by accident and striking for the thing that turned out to be completely irrelevant. That's us. And then on the comic book side, I forget exactly when digital comic books became a thing, in the last 5 years or so. But digital comic books have become a thing. Comixology is basically the iTunes of the comic book industry. And about a year ago, they were bought by this tiny little startup called Amazon.com. And nowadays, comic books are sold by through iTunes, through Google Play, through Amazon.com, basically through the Comixology app, and it's become a pretty significant deal. I don't want to get too sort of small about it, but what's kind of interesting is the comic book industry, unlike pretty much every other entertainment industry, appeals to both consumers and collectors. So the digital space of comic books is very interesting because you've got a whole bunch of people who they're just consumers. They want to get comic books and they love watching it, reading them on their iPad. But at the same time, you've got a whole bunch of comic book fans who are collectors, and quite frankly, digital doesn't mean anything to them because there's nothing to keep. In fact, the way Comixology works is you don't even get DRM-free content. You basically, you're not streaming it, but you're downloading it temporarily, and you can only download it to your tablet or your iPhone or your smartphone. There's no PDF that you get DRM-free as a result of your purchase, which is interesting. I think, I want to say that the comic book industry is somewhat unique in that regard, because if you want to download a movie and own the movie, you can own the movie. Whether it's DRM-free or not, you at least have a file residing on your hard drive. There's no files that you reside on your hard drive when you buy a comic book on Comixology or iTunes or Google Play. So in many ways, I think the comic book industry is a little bit at the forefront of maybe what is coming.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Catherine, I know you started a website where you're doing e-commerce, right? For your
You can buy a pillow online, yes.
You can buy a pillow online in a lovely,
Buy a pillow online.
in a
The
lovely.
great thing about buying a pillow online is they don't break in shipping.
I was just thinking, do you pack it with the little peanuts? Okay. Because that would really be wasteful.
We don't do any of that.
No.
Okay, sorry, what was your question?
So how? so how has the digital space transformed how you do business?
Well, when I had a show on Bravo, I got a lot of online sales. And when I don't have a show on Bravo, I don't get so many online sales.
Really?
But now I've hired someone, because one day one of my boys said, "Mom, your Instagram is like really embarrassing. You like take pictures and you put them up like 3 times." So I said, "Okay, well I'm sorry. I mean, I'm just trying, doing what I'm trying very hard, and that's probably one of them clicking me right now." So I said, "Okay, what do I do?" He said, "Mom, well, why don't you meet my friend Danny? He'll like organize your Instagramming." I said, "But I like the whole point of Instagramming and all these things is it's me. I'm doing it." He said, "But Mom, your spelling is like so bad." It's like, and I go, "Well, then they know it's me because I wouldn't hire someone with bad spelling." So anyway, I've now hired Danny, who I love, and if you follow me on Catherine M. Ireland, you can look at the last month, and then you can look at what I used to do, and you tell me what you prefer. I quite frankly preferred me with bad spelling, but it's, so I've taken it very seriously. Well, it was authentic, and you know what, this is what I sort of fight with, is being me, but then also, sorry, I'm boring you. No, please.
I would tell you.
It's ready to go.
You were boring me earlier, but now you're not.
Step right into that one.
Ask your question.
Okay. So, what was I saying? Anyway, boring one. But the idea is that, yes, as a public, not that much of a public figure, but as a brand and creating a brand, you kind of have to take it seriously. And in the last month, since I've hired Danny, it's $1,600 a month to do my Instagramming and everything, but we do it together, we meet every Sunday, I have doubled my followers.
Wow. What's Dan doing apart from spelling things correctly? Yeah, exactly.
Would anyone else like that?
I wonder what Danny's doing.
I don't know, but it's all good. You know, I'm not sure, but it's working. Listen, Tony will tell you I'm just, you know, I'm very, money, I don't really, I just, as long as I'm making it, someone's got to spend it, it may as well be me. So,
But Catherine, you're also looking at a new venture, are you not?
I am. I've gone into the app. We've all got an app in us, haven't we? I had to say rather pathetically coming up here, I had to give my elevator pitch. I had to actually look at my notes, give my one-liner because I couldn't remember it. But no, I think it's hugely changed my business. I mean, we now have things like First Dibs and One Kings Lane that have helped designers find and source things, but it's also got the downside to it. So I think just learning, I've sat along with the ride and I've watched my friends, a great friend of mine started First Dibs, another one started One Kings Lane, and I've watched them and I've been a part of it, and I've been thinking, because I think if you get an app right, it's the one way. I don't know how to buy and sell stocks and shares. I don't know how to trade. It's not what I do. I can buy a house and make a bit of money on a bit of furniture. But I think if you can get the app business right, you get it right for your business, it is still virgin territory.
Okay.
You probably don't want me to go on.
No,
Territory.
fascinating.
Anyone else or else too?
Actually, I think that was the most entertaining and engaging answer I've heard here tonight.
What virgin territory?
Yes.
Jeff.
I've got 2 eyebrow raises. Actually, Brandon and David and I have carefully conferred here. We want to semi-hijack the panel.
I mean,
Okay.
please do.
If that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah, actually, even it's not, but I don't know what it is. I have a couple questions. So how many here are artists, musicians? How many are filmmakers? Writers? Other digital artists?
Just give me my hand up for everything.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so good prospects. I mean, the obvious answer is yes, it's impacted my business. Okay. But I think, you like how I'm speaking for you now? Brandon has told me very clearly. No, I think that let's look at the micro. Our business, all of our businesses really is about creating or attaching or becoming involved with great art and connecting it with a lot of people. That's the business, okay? And there are many different media with which to do that. There is apparel, books, films, music, television, museum exhibits, Broadway, textiles. There's like a voice whispering in my head. And the media, the way in which we distribute the media changes. The media we may choose is up to us. We're a different mix, but we all have some similarities, right? The things that I've found is that, as they say, convenience drives technology. Ultimately, the customer always wins.
Yes.
Always wins. And there are cadres of out-of-work elevator operators and typewriter shop repairmen and music company, record company A&R guys and CD manufacturing plants because technology is changing. But the innate fact is art and creation will always out, right? And so we have to find ways to get art and creation to lots of people because I think we're communicating a message. It's part of humanity. It's from the soul, whether you're wearing it, reading it, or listening to it. And this is just another thing we have to embrace. And it's like in my business, right now, we're in the film business, we're in the Broadway business, we're in the book business, we're in the museum exhibit business, which is a very lucrative and interesting business.
Oh, that is.
And we're involved heavily with the Smithsonian and several other museums around the world. But with music, thank God we're not in the record business, right? Those guys are in the business of manufacturing shiny round silver things to sell to stores that don't exist for people that don't want them.
It's all coming back now.
It's clear, and we were chided in the music industry. Even I'm in film and music and Broadway, but in the music business, when I was wearing that hat, we were chided by our peers in the film business and Broadway, and even in the book publishing business, saying, "Oh, that's never going to happen to us." We were like, "Really? Wait till broadband is ubiquitous. Let's revisit this discussion." And I'm watching the exact same things happen in film. There was an editorial in the Hollywood Reporter last year, and it blew my fucking mind. Pardon me using legal terminology. And this editorial was saying, basically, we have lost the 25 and under segment of our market, and the reason is we're not writing scripts that appeal to them. If we wrote scripts that appealed to them and made stories that were engaging to them, we would get them back. This is why we've lost them. And one of my favorite quotes, and I'm a quote monger, is correlation is not causation. Right? I disagree. I had a really eye-opening moment. The last living artist, really the last active artist I managed was an EDM artist called Infected Mushroom. And these guys play all over the world, all over the time. They're on tour Thursday through Sunday, every week. And I happened to be visiting with one of the guys, and he said, you know, we're going to be home this weekend. I said, really? You know, we have no dates? And he's like, no, we're taking a weekend off. I was like, great, let's go hang out. He said, what do you want to do? I said, well, let's go to the movies. There's like 6 or 7 I want to see, 5 of which hadn't come out yet. And he goes, what do you want to see? And I said, well, I'm really interested in this one. He goes, seen it. This one, seen it. This one's coming out in 2 weeks, seen it. He'd seen every single one of them. He goes, I just download them for free. I watch them on the plane. Right? And I would venture to say that that is probably why we're losing a lot of ticket sales. So clearly, the old models aren't working. Okay, here's what the consumers are saying to me, in my opinion. We're not interested in ownership. We're only interested in access. One of the great parts of the music business was record collecting. Right? And I remember as a kid, not to date myself, but screw it, we would look at apartments, and I would look at the living room, and we would see where our record collection was going to go and where the stereo was going to go. And that was the centerpiece of our living. Right? And then it morphed into being a single guy. I realized that if I had records or CDs, I was branded as that guy. And things morph, you know, and you can watch the demographics in any medium. And the old technologies will just basically go with an older and older and older demographic or a less technologically advanced country. They'll be the last ones, right? And then it vanishes. So I actually don't know what's happening in the comic book universe.
But, you know, it's interesting because you're mentioning something that the latest trend.
We actually don't need this, do we?
No, I don't think so. I could be loud.
Project.
I think the latest trend is, you know, we've gone from CDs and DVDs, physical ownership, then we went to owning files.
Right.
Now, I think we're just going straight to streaming and on demand.
There's no question.
You know?
And no one
Kids
wants
want access.
Who wants
They
to
don't
own
want-
anything?
No one wants to own anything. They don't even want to own it digitally.
Which makes complete sense, by the way. It's funny because
It doesn't. It doesn't. It doesn't. But here's the problem: you are spending money now on something that you don't get to keep. That's actually a fundamental, paradigmatic shift.
You can't give it to anyone.
It's a
Not
fundamental.
only can you not give it to anyone, but if in case, let's say Netflix goes out of business tomorrow. Actually, better yet, let's say Apple goes out of business tomorrow. Not going to happen, but eventually maybe. All the iTunes downloads that you got, gone. You know, I always
You
think.
can't also give those to someone when you die.
No, you can't.
When you die, they die with you.
I know there's at least one startup person in the room, probably more. Here's my startup pitch. I'm not in this business. My startup pitch is I want a company. I pay a small fee, and basically you insure all of my digital media that I have paid money for and thus theoretically should own, because I'm not buying to rent, I'm buying to own. You make sure you figure out a way to get through the DRM and everything so that my content that I've paid a lot of money for, you know, that I've taken my daughter's college funds and put it towards, you know, movies and TV shows and music, that you figure out a way to, like, you know, if Apple goes out of business tomorrow, or Amazon goes out of business tomorrow, you'll insure my stuff. Go ahead.
I respectfully disagree with that. And I'll tell you why.
Okay, but I've sold a couple people here. Yes.
Don't get too excited.
You're from the music industry, so, like, you know,
I know.
credibility.
I'll put it right there.
Right. It's across from there.
Yeah.
No, the reason I say that, everything you said makes sense. The problem is that the 5 of us, at least sitting here, are not statistically significant samples. We are not the audience. Right? I'm in my 50s.
Yes.
We're looking, we see the data, right? And if you think about it, would you rather own 10 films or have access to 500 for the same amount of money?
That's why I was actually mentioning iTunes instead of, I started off with Netflix, and I stopped with Netflix, because with Netflix, you're just buying access. $8 a month buys you access.
That's what our
That's what we're
want.
switching towards.
So that's what we want.
Switch it did.
Switch. Well, I don't know, iTunes is doing pretty well. They're doing okay. You know?
Let's talk on June 9th.
Well, they're getting into the streaming business. That's exactly the thing.
Right. I will tell you, by the way, that one of my clients, Rick James, was the lead plaintiff in a major class action suit against Universal, against the label, actually, for the whole iTunes download versus license issue. And we quickly settled it because we realized, as do all of our co-plaintiffs, that buying downloads is a dead business. So,
No, totally dead business.
so
Or it's dying. It's dying. I don't think it's dead yet.
again,
But it's
you know,
not.
what we're seeing demographically is the older people, the lesser technologically advanced people are the last ones hanging on. We sell a ton of physical product. I mean, the Doors sell almost 2 million CDs a year. And I know the demographic is buying them. And we're also doing, actually, we just looked last night on Pandora, we have 545 million streams on the Doors.
Wow.
So what's happening is, yeah.
So, just on the whole streaming access as ownership thing, you know, my thought on it is, in all this controversy about the transition to streaming, is that there's nothing inherently wrong with streaming.
Exactly.
You know, I think that an access versus ownership model, we see very clearly from the demographics, that's where we're going. And there'll always be niche businesses that can create physical products for people, should they want to have that product in a physical form. I think that really how it affects all of us, and I'm in the music and film business, the way that it affects me is that fundamentally the business models around these distribution technologies are unbalanced and unsustainable.
Right, but there's really good news there. You're absolutely right. And let me tell you guys a quick
So it's an
little
economic
story.
conversation, it's not a technological conversation.
Correct. A quick little story for those of you that don't know is, you know, we're starting to hear now in the music space, people are, now all the executives are finally rallying around and saying this freemium model doesn't work, which has been obvious since inception. What happened was this guy, Daniel Ek in Sweden, launched Spotify. 50% of the people, or in excess of 50% of the citizens of Sweden, ended up paying for Spotify. He went, oh, success, this is great.
It's bundled with the telcos there.
That's
It's
right.
a telco bundle. So
That's
it's
right.
opt-in.
I'm trying to keep it top level.
Just helping you out, buddy.
Thanks, buddy. Brian and I are old friends, and he's a very smart guy. Mostly.
I'd rather be lucky than smart.
That's a good quote. He came here and he made this pitch to the record labels, and he said, here's the model. We're going to give them free Spotify in a lower bandwidth with commercials. And after they listen to it, they're going to get so into it, and then they're going to pay $9.99 a month to get higher bandwidth and no commercials. Everybody said, great.
I think I know what happened.
Well, they said, great, but your royalties are way too low. Screw you, strong letter to follow. He came back again and said, no, you've got to work with me. And they said, your royalties are way too low. We could never do this to our artists or ourselves. Screw you. Then he came back and he said, tell you what I'll do. I'll give you even lower royalties than I proposed, but I'll give you, the record labels, equity ownership in Spotify. And they went, and they took that deal. What problem is they didn't share any of that with the artists.
Well, it hasn't earned anything yet. They're down rounding on the latest VC.
They also got 8- and 9-figure advances. Anyway, the point is, what people haven't realized is all those deals that were made are term deals. It's not the way it's going to be forever, right? I mean, they're up starting this year, right? And it will get more equitable. It will also get more equitable, you know, when we reach ubiquity. When streaming music or film or books, right, is a utility, which means it will be probably packaged into, bundled into an internet ISP bill or a cell phone bill, and people will look at it and go, okay, $9. Look what's happening with the Amazon card.
Well, just really quickly on this, so if you look at film and TV on that side of the business, they're a lot smarter. They have transactional streaming, you can rent something, they have transactional downloads, they have subscription-based stuff. Spotify isn't Netflix, you know, Netflix has a limited inventory, it's a post-windowed, you know, platform, right? If the record business had done what film and TV did with these multiple tier value platforms,
Right.
then we might be in better shape. So I think that the inevitability is that we're going to move towards those different types of platforms.
That's the
and
good
become value
news.
tiers.
The good news is what you're seeing today, which is bogus, ineffective, unfair, is going to change.
So what are you gonna do to change it?
Here's what's going to happen. First of all, the
Do you
deals
have
are
a
all
spare
going to turn
bedroom
out.
until we get there?
And what's that?
So do you have a spare bedroom until we get there?
Well, I'll tell you what I told my
You can have my
clients.
chair though.
I'll tell you what I've told my clients, because I think it's good advice for any artist or creator, which is I said, look, the next 2 to 4 years are going to suck. Right? But it's going to be great. And when it's great, the other aspect of these streaming services for any medium is that it's all a level playing field. And so the best branded artist wins. Right? So whoever gets streamed more gets a bigger piece of the check. And I jokingly told Otis Redding's widow and daughter, I said, we should just take $30 million and buy billboards in every major city on a major thoroughfare. It just says, Otis! And then as soon as we get ubiquity, everybody will get so many more streams. I was obviously bullshitting. We can't have, it's not an equitable position to take, but I was trying to make a point. Yeah.
To draw on what Mark said with the collectors, do you think music can eventually have the collectors industry with records being as much of a draw, in the long run? Because I know even kids are starting to draw onto vinyl as an opportunity to almost rebel against what is streaming.
It's an excellent question, and frankly, it's one of the curveballs that Mark threw, in a good way, where I went,
I think, honestly, my instinct is collector, there's always going to be collectors. And I was actually, thinking of the incredible resurgence in vinyl. But, and I don't
wait a
have...
minute, but let's quantify incredible.
Well, that's what I was saying, which is, it's niche.
Yeah.
It's all the
aspires to niche.
Yes, the collectors, but in general, the collectors market is niche.
Levels, man. Come on.
That's just and I think that's what's happening with the comic book industry. That's why comic book retailers are struggling so much. Is it's hard to be in a niche market and pay for brick and mortar leases and rent and everything else.
We're finding more and more, even like in the book business, we do a lot of books, and the books that I enjoy doing, which are these beautiful photo books, like with lots of ephemera.
Catherine's.
They don't sell. Nobody cares.
Thank you. Like mine.
Nobody cares.
Exactly.
I care, but
Yeah.
I'm not a statistically significant sample,
But I
apparently.
don't think you're doing it. I do a book. I think I got one royalty check for $800 and I've sold over 100,000 books. Okay, I didn't have a good price. I should have had someone doing the deal for me. But it was about doing it my way.
Well, it's also, it's Marcus the brand of
And it
Catherine's.
markets a brand and I got jobs out
But
of
the
it.
point I was trying, the reason I was
sorry,
using it as
back
an
to you.
illustration was
I was just
that.
trying to bring names up.
I've seen your book. I want to get you guys, I want to back out of over hijacking.
Not.
You did hijack. You said you were willing to. You're honest about it, which I appreciate.
I want to co-hijack.
Go ahead, let's bring the fashion to
Did you have a question?
Wait till clothes are streamed. It's coming, baby.
Exactly.
One of the reasons I love apparel.
Exactly.
You can't handle apparel.
I think we're actually in the best industry to be affected by the digital age because we're selling a tangible product that you can never have digitally. And actually, Instagram, Facebook, every social media platform has helped our business tremendously and has helped all of our clients get their business off the ground from any level. And I mean, we have moms that just had kids that can't go back to work and design their own line and then sell it on Etsy and then sell it to boutiques, sell it to major retailers. And so it's creating so many jobs for our industry, and it's actually been the most, the best way for us to sell direct to consumer. I mean, before we had to go to trade shows and spend $20,000 on a booth 4 times a year, and now we don't have to do that anymore. We can just post it on Instagram, get it on the right girl with the right amount of followers, and the one girl will sell you.
$1,600 a month.
Where's Danny? Let's get Danny.
Sorry.
And those posts will all be corrected.
Now people don't believe it.
So the final area is, do you feel like your work is, we have to get into the legal part.
Oh.
It's going to be the boring part. Hate to bring it down. Do you feel like your work is adequately protected in terms of piracy or?
No, not at all. Nowhere close.
No.
Oh my God, nowhere close. No.
I remember Catherine calling me up one day and going, you know, some printer, somebody's selling my fabric designs, and unfortunately,
Half price, some.
yeah, person who we won't name, but in
Tony, would you go and have a look?
yes. So in the fashion area, I was a big proponent of this fashion piracy legislation that has never been enacted, and it was fought by the big box, stores and retailers. But how do you feel as designers about getting some limited protection for your fashion designs?
It's incredibly tough because the way that our company works as private label designers is the client comes in with someone else's garment. And they're like, I love this garment and I want to make this garment. So our purpose of our company is to train them not to just straight knock people off because there's no creativity to that, there's no ingenuity, it's just blatant knockoff artists. And why would we want to be helping these people just do that? So when they come into us, our whole role is to get them out of doing that and to come up with something more creative. But as far as protecting what they create, it's really hard because if you try to patent all these garments, nothing will ever come from that except more legal problems with everything.
What if you copyright it?
Tony.
Yeah, why aren't they trying to copyright their garments?
Well, there is no, you cannot
It's
copyright
very hard
There's
to.
certain things
fashion.
that you can patent, like Levi's has a patent where their Levi's tab is
But
you
the
cannot
Levi's are
legally
Levi's.
Yeah.
do
a
that.
trademark.
But I mean, as far as making that same sweater, so anyone can do that and get away with it.
But
Unfortunately.
also with a textile, I think they can change the design by, they can bring it up, half an inch,
Yeah.
and they can make 3 things, they can use my same colors, and it's possible. It happens in hotels all the time. They buy 1 yard from me, and then they go, and it's clearly my design.
But has that been affected by the ease that the digital space has created, the ability to copy so quickly?
Yeah, they can go online, they can go and find my thing. I actually am probably the only person that said, how marvelous. They were able to do it for cheaper. I take my hat off to them. I mean, you know what? What's that saying where copying, thank you.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I go with that and
Wow.
move on, and I design something else.
You're going to be banished from the, yeah,
We'll hear from someone from a completely different generation.
yes.
Who sees Jeff as just a kid.
Mhm.
He's only 52. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So, part of it is I'm wondering what I'm doing here, and what I was expecting.
Mhm.
I hear a lot of talk about stuff in the future and what you said before. I think Jack Valenti was the one that says the truth of the matter is no one knows shit.
William Goldman in his book.
Yeah. And so, I heard you talking about, we'll lose all the music and stuff. You'll not lose all the music. It's too valuable. There'll be some way that it'll be kept. All those things. But that's just the way business is. I kind of would like to hear how, because everybody's got an idea. Everybody's got an idea. I'm an old Wall Street guy. And Wall Street, there's this adage, is that you never bet on the horse. You bet on the jockey. So there are wonderful ideas. I'm sure there's so many ideas out here that are just so terrific and really, really big money makers. But it comes down to the execution. Mm-hmm. And I think that's also what Wall Street is about. And I kind of want to hear how you guys help differentiate and take some of the people out of here and where they stand out from the crowd. I used to do venture capital stuff. I haven't done it, but because people knew me in that realm, they still present ideas to me, and I hear so many of the same ideas. You know, they're high-tech stuff, so it's out of my realm. I have to give it to somebody that can really figure it out. But again, it's like, how do we get some sort of traction to get some other place? And by the way, I'm old enough to have spent an evening with Janis Joplin, which we'll talk about later.
What kind of
fascinating. Fascinating.
But Jeff, like in your business, I know that the area of photography and rights of publicity become very big because you're dealing with a lot of musical icons who are no longer with us, and their estates are managing their legacies. And I know photographers have a particularly hard time now because there's no control, you know, over the use of images.
What are they going to do
There's
with
some
pictures?
control. There's some control. But can I answer it, Art? Can I
Sure.
speak to Art's
Yeah.
question? Because I think it's a really fascinating one, and certainly one that I deal with all the time, which is, I'm an adjunct professor at UCLA, and I'm teaching the Herb Alpert School of Music, and I was teaching last night, and we were talking about this very topic, which is, we talked about artists, and we were talking about hits and hit songs and charts and radio, and I said, what I used to tell my artists is I don't manage songs, I manage artists, right? And it's not, and in my field now, whether it's Jim Morrison or Janis Joplin or Tupac, if you think it's about the music, you've already failed, right? Because if you think it's about the music, then you must also, by deductive logic, think that the magic to James Dean is about his acting, or the magic to Marilyn Monroe is that she's hot and blonde, right? I think it's two things. One is, in pop culture, we tend to give a shit about what people think if that person is good at something. Nobody cares what Bob the plumber in Chillicothe, Ohio thinks about anything. But people are keenly interested in what Derek Jeter thinks because he's really good at hitting a ball. Right? That's on one side. On the other side, there's a persona. As a current artist, in whatever medium it is, tech, startup, film, photography, if you have a point of view and you have an aesthetic and you have a take on things and you can identify that, right, then you become interesting to me. And then everything you do becomes interesting to me. Lady Gaga is a really great example. She's got a point of view. She's got an aesthetic. It's not going to connect with everybody, but with some people it's going to connect heavily. And with those people, me being one of them, I'm interested in anything she does. I'm interested in the concert, I'm interested in the song, I'm interested in the book, I'm interested in her performance on the Oscars, I'm interested in whatever it is she does, versus investing in an idea or a song or a book or a film. You know, one of the things, and I'm sure it's true in your business, one of the things I always said was, if an A&R guy brings you this amazing artist, sign the A&R guy. Right? Because and I watch this with people that come to me all the time with ideas or how to start a business, and they're so precious about it, and they're hanging on so tight. And sometimes I tell them, I go, dude, if you only have one idea, maybe it's the $1 billion idea, I don't know, but I deal in the middle ground. But if you only have one idea, I'd rather invest in the guy than the idea. I'd rather find a really creative person who's going to come up with 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 things. I get more shots, right? And I can spread it out into other media, right? So for me, it's about finding out what's special about you or the artist you're working with or the property you're working with in the film, figuring out how to brand that. That really is the term. Sorry for any musicians out there. It's not an artistic term. It's a commerce term because we're talking about commerce. And then focus on building that, and then anything that comes out of that will be interesting, right? And that's what we do, frankly, with all of my artists. You know, it's not about the music. The music's there, and it's phenomenal, and it's a connecting point. But 13-year-olds don't get into Jim Morrison just because of the music. And by the way, if you ever see a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old wearing a Ramones t-shirt, right, walk up to them and just say, the Ramones manager asked me to ask you a question. Name 3 songs. And you and I both know they can't, and that should tell you right there it's not about the music. Because if it was about the music, they'd know the music. Yeah.
Okay, that brings up a good point. I was a 13-year-old Jim Morrison wannabe, wrote graphic poetry, but I knew every song under it. Is that a generation now versus a generation? I'm 32.
I don't know the answer to that. I was the same way, but I don't think that we're representative samples.
Fair enough.
You know, I think we're in creative and we're in the arts, and but I think a lot of people do know the music for sure.
They do. I have 3 boys,
Right.
and they all know. I'm surprised by what they know.
But again, if it was just about the music, right? Like I can, you know, Janis Joplin has a different persona, and her business is probably 5 to 8% of what Jim Morrison's is. And I would arguably say, subjectively, that her music is greater than 5 to 8% of Jim's. But clearly, there's some kind of brand connection there. I think I know what it is.
Sex.
What's that?
Sex.
Sex,
Well, I'll tell you what I think it is. Maybe this could applies across the board. In fact, I'm not going to tell you what it is. I don't think I have too much time.
I want to know what it is.
Go ahead.
You want to know what it is?
Yeah.
Fine.
We got section marketing on the table.
This may sound pedantic and stupid, but it is a very core part of how I market all of my clients. Okay, which is that Freud talked about the 3 stages of the ego that humans go through, because humans are the only animals that are born without instinct. We have reason and an ego state instead. And we go from an infantile ego state to an adolescent ego state to an adult ego state.
Freud didn't spend a minute in Hollywood, did he?
No, exactly. No instinct.
Thanks for the laugh.
And those 3 ego states are designed to let humans do what we're supposed to do, which is to survive, to socialize with our fellows, and to give and nurture life. And when we morph into an adolescent ego state, which is right around age 11 or 12, 13, that's the first time the human being sees beyond the end of their own nose. And that's where we start to go, okay, well, my parents were a Democrat. Does that make me a Democrat? It's what S.E. Hinton wrote about when she wrote The Outsiders. It was 4 13-year-olds trying to figure out, am I a social? Am I a greaser? Am I a jock? Am I a nerd? What am I? And I think that students come into high school, or thereabouts, as a blank aesthetic canvas. And by the end of high school, they're completely branded themselves. And they've decided who they are and what they're going to be into. And those decisions will become the foundation for every artistic and aesthetic decision they will make for the rest of their lives. And right at that moment, when they're starting to question authority, when they're starting to look at other art forms, when they're starting to see how they're going to fit in, they discover Jim.
Jim.
Right? I could give you the whole rundown on Janis. It's a whole different thing. But it's really interesting what resonates with people. Janis is an iconic figure to women. She's an iconic. No, I don't.
When did they get into Rick James and people and Tupac, that sort of thing? Different?
Rick James, I'll tell you what it is one of the things we revere as a society. Look, pop culture is the last tune, I think, that America calls that the world dances to. Right? I mean, we are the leaders in pop culture, and we are who the world emulates. I don't think it's really true.
There's 2 things we're good at. We're good at entertaining people and blowing shit up.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Sometimes can be entertaining.
We make entertainment about it. But those are the 2 things we're good at.
We're producing Rock and Roll High School for Broadway, and what I told the other producers, I said, we got to blow up a high school on Broadway stage. Blowing up shit's cool.
Yeah, well, that's
combined with 2.
No, it's true. You might have a hit on your hands if you combine the 2.
We revere rock stars, right? However you define that behavior. And there was a moment, I remember in my UCLA class about 10 or 12 years ago, at that moment, the biggest rock star on the planet was Dennis Rodman. And to me, one guy, one statistically insignificant sample, I see a lot of artists come out today in the rock and alternative and pop worlds like pre-polished little turds, ready for corporate branding. There's no danger, there's no questioning authority, it's just being nice for the corporate dollar. The rock stars are in the hip-hop world. They're the ones that are questioning authority, they're the ones that are violating boundaries, they're stepping over lines, sometimes good, sometimes bad, but it's that rock star persona. Rick James is the absolute avatar of fuck you, party, rock star, I don't give a fuck what you think. And in a way, it's a sense of freedom. And it's a sense of self-realization and entitlement. Maybe I'm being a little too pedantic about it, but Rick James is unabashed rock stardom, Hollywood excess, which is awesome.
So was Tupac then his junior, or how would you say Tupac?
Tupac is a poet and a messenger.
But,
Yeah.
right? And Tupac was a writer, and Tupac was a singer and a performer and a poet, and very well accomplished in all those areas.
But not a rock star?
What's that?
But not
Oh, he's a total rock star. Total rock star, come on. But if you look at, weirdly enough, I'm not sure how I look at this, but all the research is showing us that these last two generations, he is almost like the Martin Luther King of their generation. Right? I'm not sure if that's fair or right, but that is how people are viewing it.
Do you know who 2 Chainz is?
What's the
She said 2 Chainz.
I like 2 Chainz. You know, I did a show with, what's that great, is it Lonnie Love? And we did some thing, and I brought up 2 Chainz, and everyone was like, because my children, as I was going on to do the show, I said, I know we're going to be discussing, it was the day after the Grammys. And I said, what shall I bring up to like sound like I know about this? They go, Mom just mentioned 2 Chainz. And I mentioned 2 Chainz.
I branded you, made you credible.
We're sort of at the end of our time. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts, comments? Go ahead.
Mark, would you say that Stephen Amell is winning the internet?
Would you say, could I hear that question?
is Stephen Amell winning
Stephen
the
Amell is
internet?
winning the internet.
That's a good question. He's
Tell
doing
people
really, yeah, I'm
tell
sorry.
people
Stephen
to
Amell
see.
is the lead of the show I work on called Arrow, and he has an incredibly successful Facebook page and a really amazing internet following. You know, he's doing really well, and he's cultivated it in an incredibly short amount of time. He'd probably want me to tell you that he's winning the internet. I think he's contending, but he's doing very, very well. I think, you know, it's interesting. I as an experiment, can I just quickly digress for a second? I tried an experiment about, because one of the things I'm interested in is harnessing the power of the internet for doing something more than just pushing my show. And my show has a certain segment that they're fans of a certain romantic relationship on the show, and there was a plant on the show that they associated with this relationship. I'm trying to do this as short as possible, and we destroyed the plant in an episode, and my production team actually filmed some new footage with the plant sort of rising from this magical pit that resurrects you. So I put on Tumblr and linked to Twitter, if a certain charity that I wanted to see funded on GoFundMe is funded before last night's episode, I would put this special footage on the internet, and it got funded within like 2 hours. And I'm like, wow, this is like, now we're talking about something real here.
Yeah.
And it was just a small little experiment.
It's nascent power.
It's incredible, and it's like that's I feel like that gives me hope for the future. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't give me hope for the future, you know, but that kind of gives me hope for the future, that you can start to move the needle in certain positive respects.
That's great.
You know, it was pretty cool.
It can also drive creativity because you can have crowd-funded plot twists.
Well, yeah, I think that's a little dangerous. That's a little dangerous. You know, I subscribe to Stan Lee, who created Spider-Man and Fantastic Four and everyone. I subscribe to his philosophy, which is you give the audience what they need, not what they want.
Right.
Because if you give them what they want, the truth is that's the quickest way to get them to stop wanting it.
Well, the reason they want you is because you're a very effective curator of what they cleave to, and I agree with you. Like a lot of people said, we should put Doors songs up there, let people remix them. It's like, you know why the Doors are doing
You don't want to let them get to, you know, you don't want to help them make those. You don't
well,
want them to help you
it
make those.
perverts my art and it perverts your art. But what I'm saying is that crowdsourcing plot twist can be an art in itself.
That's true. That's true, and I'm all in favor of that. You know, as a separate art form.
Is that American Idol?
I'll show my age, but like there was back in the 80s, Batman. There was a famous comic book where, you know, Batman comes upon Robin, and Robin could either live or die, killed or not killed by the Joker. And this was way back before the internet, and you were given 2 800 numbers, and you could call and vote about whether or not Robin would live or die.
of course, Robin ended up dead because that's that was the first like crowd source, comic book plot twist. That's
I don't know. Maybe the gladiator battles were the first crowdsourced plot twist.
That's probably true too. But wasn't it always the emperor who got to make the call? Yeah.
Exactly. Any other questions? Yes.
Hi, Jeff. You have mentioned that artists need to understand that streaming is the future of music. However, Taylor Swift, when her new album came out this year, she made sure that her album was not able to be streamed anywhere, not on Spotify, not on
Except Tidal.
YouTube. What?
Except Tidal.
Yes. But because she did those restrictions, she hired a whole team to make sure that there wasn't anything on YouTube. She had the most album sales seen in a long time.
Sure.
So what do you think about that? Do you think that if artists kind of say no to streaming, that they could have more album sales and that's like higher revenue?
I think you could have a first-class seat or a second-class seat or a steerage seat on the Titanic. It's all going in. Yes, I think right now there are things you can do, and by the way, I do them. When I know I'm having physical product come out, I'll put it up for pre-order on my artist sites, and if my artists are alive, like the Two Doors, I tell people we're going to have them autographed 10 copies, and they're going to be sent out randomly to people who pre-order. So I still ride the vid on physical, but there's no question it's going away.
That it works for right now, but you're saying.
And whatever her, and whatever her stance was on that, she clearly altered it for Tidal.
Well, her stance was that she wasn't supporting free. So if it was a streaming platform that was a paid streaming platform, she would allow. But if there was a free platform, she wouldn't. We played a lot with Windowing over the last 2 years.
Except the Tidal's free. They have 2 platforms. They were freemium model.
I'd have to look at it, but my understanding was that as long as it was paid, she was doing it, with the exception of YouTube, which is a whole other problem. But we played a lot with Windowing, and what I've come to the conclusion of is it's over, we lost.
Right.
Unless you're Taylor Swift. I think that if you have something that has a large enough front end on it, has a big enough head on it where you can drive people, where if it's not available on Spotify, where they actually will be motivated to go get it on iTunes, they will. But what I found over the last 2 years when I looked at the numbers at the end of last year was that Windowing really wasn't working for us on our titles because they didn't have a big enough head on them. So if people are if they are in the Spotify ecosystem and they're looking for my title and they can't find it, they're not going to iTunes to get it. They're staying in the Spotify ecosystem, and they're going to the next available thing. So I can either capture that revenue that is available, or I can continue to ride transactional downloads all the way down without getting any of that residual revenue in this transition to streaming. But my attempts to window to capture more transactional revenue by windowing turns out to probably not have been a good idea for me.
There are different
Taylor Swift,
strategies.
I think it's great.
There are different strategies, but they're all terrible.
I'm lost.
Yeah.
The good news, by the way, in this whole streaming thing, I don't know about the economics of the independent film business or television business, but in the record business,
Oh,
when we,
textile business.
or textile, well, the textiles don't get downloaded.
Yes.
Is when we get to partial ubiquity, right? When we get to a base of 100 to 150 million subscribers, and we will, the record business will have their best year in their entire history.
One last question.
So another fish out of water here. I have an enormous idea, and technology has zero to do with it. Yes, I'm going to have to hire some people that know how to do this shit, but there's tons of people that know social media and all the stuff that I don't even know.
Danny.
$1,600 a month. Okay.
He does a tweet a day. And Instagram, he gets it all in.
So I'm looking for some assistance with, from an incubator group, some resources. I'm all by myself, and no one can do anything by themselves.
He's your man.
And so, but it's not based on some new technology. It's based on an idea that's huge.
All right,
And
John,
there's
give us your elevator
a lot of money involved with it. And I'm not doing this because of money reasons, for this. This is something that just has to be done, and why it's not being done, I don't know, but I figured I might as well do it. But I need some help. Now, am I in the right place? Because as I said, I'm hearing all kinds of things about Spotify and this is how we do this, and you know, patent infringement.
My suggestion
It's
is
like,
after
I don't want to hear any of this shit. That's what lawyers are for. Fuck that, you know? That's what lawyers, hired guns,
That's
you know?
what we are.
You can only do so
You know?
much.
But I want some heavy-duty folks that I can sit down with and really do something that's really magnificent.
We'll talk after the program.
Okay.
Okay? Hey, I want to thank our panel. It's great.